Hey, it's April Rogerson, the contract slayer on the Slay Your Day podcast. And today we have, I say this every week, but it's very true because I try to make sure I'm bringing y'all some very special people to talk to. We have Leah Merriweather here, and she's from Vibrate Higher LLC. And I must say, I'm going to let her introduce herself, but she too was a part of this conversation I had a couple of weeks back. And it started so organically. It was a beautiful conversation. And I said, you got to come on my show. So Leah, first and foremost, Vibrate Higher. Yes. Let's start there.
So Vibrate Higher is sort of like a movement for me. And it's more so of, you kind of turn your passion into a thing like a LLC or a business so that you can talk about it, in different ways. So Vibrate Higher was something that came to me years ago. I want to say it was around 2012. And it was just an idea of being more, going through the process of unlearning what we have been told to go more into the now, into the inner space. So I created the company to assist in that process as I'm unlearning and going through the processes of that. So Vibrate Higher in a nutshell is I'm an advocate of well-being, and it is a company that supports that. It supports people living in their free dominion. It supports people to live instead of being stuck in the mind space. Unlearning that and remembering that there is a heart space and finding out how to navigate that space.
Which is why I said the conversation was like, okay. Because what was interesting about it was we were partially talking about relationships, but we were also talking about our existence within a relationship, our existence outside the relationship. And now you said we, when you say we, because you said for us to unlearn things. Is there a specific group that you focused on, or? No,
it's just humanity, so I consider myself a humanitarian, and I feel in a sense we all are. But where we practice that is where we first take up the cross, so to speak, and do the work, so to speak. And then what works for us, we turn around and share it with others. So that is the act of humanitarianism. And it can look like a lot of different things, but
And one of those things that it can look like is what you just said in terms of separating from the mind and because some people, they're very physical, right? Or they're very much in the kind of physical space. So to break that up or break that down in a way that makes sense for some folks, even some of us who do vibrate higher, we struggle with that, right? So let's break down what kind of getting out of our mind and living in our heart looks like or feels like, or what we're trying to connect to when we are doing that.
Well, the first thing I like to share with people is to watch children. Watch children up to the age about 6, maybe 7. 7, we start to kind of get into the analytical space, and we start to take on the programs, as like I call them, and conditions of our parents, of society, as we begin to learn externally. We leave that internal being alone, literally, and we begin to operate externally, which means operating solely from the mind. And what happens is we forget that there is a space of the heart. But children know this.
What are some examples that you can see children doing outside of like ripping off their pamper and streaking through the streaking through the house, which is honestly we're like, wait, that's an example of how we can say stop that action, and this is not what we do, right? This is not what we do in society, and obviously there's reasons why we don't do that, but other examples that are positive attributes to that childlike inner wonder that you're saying connect to. What are other examples of that are kind of squashed or quashed for us as children that we abandon as we get older?
Well, and I'm this is to say every parent is loving and we do what we feel is best.
I mean, most.
But right. most. You're right.
Most parents.
We cannot say every parent. Yes. But one of the things that we do, and I've done this, is, let's start here. Children are the truth. Children tell the truth. If they don't want to eat something, they're not going to eat it, period. They don't have to give you a reason. They don't want it. If they are upset, they will let you know. They'll fall out, have a tantrum or whatever. It'll last maybe, a few minutes, maybe sometimes longer, whatever. But they're in their truth. They're expressing it. If you ask a child a question, you better be ready for the answer because you're going to get the truth.
Right.
Right. So one of the things that we do when we start to begin to train children out of the heart and into the mind is we'll do things like we'll start the negotiation process. So we'll say, you better eat those peas or you're not going to get the ice cream afterwards. And you better, no playtime and this and that. Where the child is telling the truth. I don't want it. Why they don't have to tell you why. They're just being themselves and not wanting to eat it at all. So that's one of the ways that we can look at children and say, okay, how can I take some aspects? Well, tell the truth.
Right.
Be the truth. If you don't want to go to that soccer game, don't go.
Right. So I think interesting that you're saying this because there is some context there, right? So there are pieces of us that are saying, hey, in the interest of humanity, the truth is not always pretty, right? Or it doesn't always feel good. It may not feel good to you and it may not feel good to the receiver. So we have to discern when we should, how much truth should we be giving and how much truth we should be living. But then on the flip side of that is the balance of your no's, right? So even with the children, one, your no could be harmful to you or your no could be harmful to someone else. So I think trying to find the fine line between not saying yes for everything and not being in agreement for everything, but also to your point of how parents are trying to navigate children's rearing, because even from, and I'm not sure about you, and I would imagine in your space that you're trying to live in, that we try to give our children more voices than we had, right? But in that same space, you're kind of like, listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
You're the child. Yeah. But in so many ways, to your point, you don't want them to lose that essence of truth and that essence of being that is something that you yourself feel like this was kind of taken away from me at a young age. How do I still empower my child to have those things, but also understand that they still live in the world that we live in?
Right.
So how do we find a way as adults trying to recapture that childlike wonder of living in the heart, being in our truth, but also understanding, because I find that some people are like, I'm a realist, I'm gonna tell you like it is and all this other stuff, but it's harmful, it's caustic. So how do we live in that space without being offensive to the world around us in the same humanitarian spirit of why we're doing that, why we're trying to recapture this childhood, why we're trying to recapture this feeling or this element of how we live?
Well, typically, you got to preface some of these conversations, So typically, when it is expressed from the heart, it's received by the heart.
Okay.
So typically, if you are expressing it, the person who is receiving it knows where it's coming from. A lot of times that I'm gonna speak my mind, tell my truth, that's mind energy. It's actually not coming from the heart.
Gotcha.
It's coming from a place of judgment. It's coming from a place of, and the judgment dates back to how far ever the judgment goes or it started. It could be something your grandmother said. It could be whatever. In other words, it's not, it usually isn't a true essence or something pure from us. It is an idea, which is a program and a condition that comes from a society. It can come from church. It can come. Now, don't knock me when I say church, y'all. It's just the truth. They're about to call you all kinds of heathens. Right.
She coming in here with that spiritual mumbo jumbo. That is not of the Lord.
Listen. I'm not here to attack. I'm just
coming from the heart, space, not from the mind.
I'm offering an invitation to let's process differently.
Yeah. I think what you just said about that is very insightful and impactful. And there is this space where those of us who have felt victimized from having this childhood wonder or this voice or any variation of that taken away from us, that we are responding in a way that is way more combative, and it does not fully speak to the idea of speaking your truth in a positive, light-filled way versus I'm not biting my tongue. I don't care what you say. I've been biting my tongue all my life.
Yeah.
Mama said, this one said, that one said, and I'm no longer biting my tongue is not creating the boundary that you would like it to create. Because again, most times you're trying to create a boundary that is, not most times, what the intent is when people are speaking this way is to try to create a boundary, try to create a space where they can get back to that. But the way they're going about it is kind of a flamey way, a flame-throwing way. And if they would identify more of a heartfelt way of speaking their truth, it wouldn't come across as angry or caustic or combative. And so many times you hear people are saying, well, people don't like to hear my opinion because I'm going to tell it like it is. But it's the way that you're telling it, and not just the way that you're telling it, but where it's coming from.
Exactly. Because it's either proactive or it's reactive. So usually when it's that harsh, it's reactive. It's a reaction to something that was said, something that was, something you're thinking, something you feel, Whereas if it's proactive, it's coming from the space of the heart. There is nothing behind it. That's why I was saying earlier, when it comes from the heart, is usually received by the heart because there's nothing behind it. And you could tell. You could, when you're speaking to people, you know the difference.
So something else you mentioned earlier was like, for example, you said if you don't want to go to the soccer game, don't go to the soccer game. So marrying the impact of you not wanting to do something, or you because there are times that we don't want to do things, it's not, but now there's this element, let's say as parents, you want to show up for your children, you want to show up for your friends, you want to show up for mom, you want to show, so it's not always that these are things that we want to do. How do we figure out where the lines should be, because there is an innate responsibility that we have to the other people in our lives that really do impact how we operate. And sometimes we do lose sight of all the things that we're trying to accomplish from getting back to the heart because we're operating from the heart and trying to show up for people. So how do we operate from the heart and showing up for people, but at the same time, not necessarily protecting our heart, but finding ways to nurture our heart and what we're feeling internally, and sometimes the guilt that goes along with that. So
listen, I know, but it really, I see it as tricycling, training wheels, and you graduate to more of living that truth because we've been conditioned out of it. So one of the things that I do, if there's something I really don't want to do, I go to my heart and then I ask my heart, then what is it that you really want in this moment? And in that moment, if I'm not able to produce that for myself, I don't be hard on myself or anything like that. I just go into a space of neutrality because in your heart, it's a neutral, it's a neutral experience, so in your heart, you're feeling peace, neutrality, or the force that is used to get you to take action is joy, excitement, and inspiration, So it's one of those things where you navigate through it through practice. And, and then you can be honest to yourself and be like, I really don't want to go, and then in that space of you being honest with yourself, that brings you to a space of peace. And then from there, make your decision.
So let me ask you this, because at the same time, I think that we are saying in our heart and in our minds, I really, really don't want to do this. But we're conflicted with what is going to be the reaction of this person or this space or this place when I don't do. And being able to say, so I'm getting better about my nose, but at the same time, I struggle with, not hurting someone or not disappointing someone or not offending someone, but at the same time you're hurting or offending yourself or you're mad at yourself because you're saying, I said I wasn't going to do this. I was going to get better about this and that kind of stuff. So what are some tools that you would suggest in terms of identifying whether your heart is neutral about this or positive joy? Obviously, it's much easier to identify joy and passion about something than it is about the pain that you're feeling or the neutrality that you're feeling. And I feel in terms of giving tools, but sometimes the things that we don't want to do for people are not necessarily pain that we're feeling. It's just we just don't want to do.
Like that child that just don't want to eat that food.
It's not a reason. It's not I don't feel like sitting there. I don't feel like this. I don't feel like that. I'm just not in the mood, right? And that's a good enough reason, but that's not necessarily a pain point, right? It's and at the same time, understanding that your neutrality about this thing or not really wanting to do this thing can cause a pain point for somebody. So identifying your neutrality, is your neutrality more important than that person's pain point? And how do we kind of reconcile that? What are some tools that we can use to help with that?
Well, one of the things that I realized over the years is that someone else's pain really isn't mine. So whatever the person is dealing with, and this might sound cold, but if we look at it in this way, whatever ails us, or is joyful to us is ours. Is our own experience based upon our own programs, conditions, or whatever, how we view the world. We're all like, if you get 100 people in a room, you're 100 people having your own experience. And what one person says could offend the whole room, but one person could not be offended. So how could one person not be offended by what someone says and 99 people are? Is because it's coming from our own thoughts, ideas, beliefs, what we were told. So when some of the tools that I use, I have 2 tools that I can share. So one is the mirror tool. Look in the mirror. You cannot lie to yourself. So if there is something that is ailing you, or you're trying to make a decision, or you need an answer or something like that, just look in the mirror and ask yourself. And that the true answer is there because it's with you. But when that reflection is back to you, you can't lie to yourself, And another one I use a lot is the mind to heart drop. So energetically, we can feel where energy is. If you take your awareness to your wrist, you're going to feel energy in your wrist. So when the energy is in the head, that is the mind in control. When the energy is in your heart space, that is your heart in control. So in any time of the day, several times of the day, you can drop the energy, the thoughts from your mind into your heart. So I call it the mind to heart drop. So you would just command your spirit to say, I command my spirit to take the thoughts from my mind and drop them into my heart now. And then it's like, imagine that your head is the 10th floor of an elevator. And then you count backwards, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're going to feel that energy come down to your heart. Yes, you're going to feel it. And then there's a sense of peace. Right. And then you can continue to do it until you feel like the energy come from your head to your heart. And then at that moment, try to think. You can. You'll be at such a state of peace. So that's one of the tools that I use like several times throughout the day.
And thank you for that. We're here with Leah Merriweather with Vibrate Higher. So in the Western world, we are so, back to what you were saying earlier in the beginning of the segment, is about how much we're taught to think more, right? So it's kind of these shutting off the heart and almost solely focusing on the mind. Yep. And I know that there has been a little bit of a shift to get away from that, even in corporate spaces where they're trying to figure out ways to shift the mindset between kind of this work-life balance that they say that they go on.
Right.
But the work-life balance, right? And you have done a lot of work with different individuals because they are struggling with these different elements and they still have to operate in the world, right? So whether these are survivors of sexual abuse survivors, domestic violence survivors, you have found a way to be a part of a community that is helping to bring that to the forefront and help people figure out a way to navigate both these spaces, learn these tools, but also obviously we still have bills to pay.
Yeah, right.
So talk a little bit more about the retreat that you're a part of.
Right. Yeah. So there is a place called Sapria. It is a place for sexual abuse survivors of all ages. It is in the North Georgia mountains, and it's I can't think of the city. It's not that important right now. But it's called Sapria.
Spell it. Yeah.
SAPREA.
Okay.
Sapria. So this is actually free.
You hear that, people?
Yes, it's free 99.
Spell that too.
FREE. Right, it is free. Yes. So it is Monday through Thursday.
Okay.
So you will come and you will stay at the retreat. And I teach yoga. I'm a certified yoga teacher. So I teach yoga to, I don't like to say teach. I assist in guiding these ladies through the yoga practice. And the idea of it is to bring them back into their bodies, because a lot of time we escape the body. Where do we escape? In the mind. So we escape the body because of the PTSD and the trauma and experiences that we've had with the body. So this is a very special type of yoga flow. I don't do all of the typical yoga flows because they can kind of ignite,
Which I was about to ask you about this in a second, but go ahead.
Yeah, it can ignite an experience. So I'm very, how can I put it? I'm very intentional, with the flow. But I love working with them because it's women of all ages. And I really, when I started working with this organization, I was shocked at the age range of women who are there. And I've seen women in their 60s and 70s, and some of them getting help for the first time.
From something that happened to them.
Yes.
Could have been decades
5,
ago. Yeah.
Age 5 or 2 or something like that. And, so there, it's different experiences. Some have been in sex trafficking. Some have been, just abused by partner. Some has been abused by someone in the family or whatever. I don't get the stories, and I'm not interested in those stories. I'm just there as a support, So that's one of the things. And then I also assist with veterans, and that's another PTSD type of situation where these people of all ages are working with a lot of trauma. And the thing is, we look at these situations and we call out PTSD, but we're all experiencing
in some form of fashion, and that's why I was going to say to you that the work that you're doing is amazing, specifically with those communities, because I think so many times, I don't remember the statistics on women experiencing sexual abuse, but I also think that there's something to be said about the amount of men who have experienced sexual abuse that is not being addressed.
Exactly.
And it is kind of this dirty little secret that goes unspoken, but there's this kind of trauma that we as women we know that have existed. And if we sat in a round table like we did that day and something triggers the conversation, now we wind up having this deep conversation about these things that we experienced. It just so happened that in that conversation we were talking about men and relationships, but in you don't do that. Talking to the phone, I didn't put it on do not disturb. But in the grand scheme of wanting to go back, right, and try to capture this essence there's some work that we're doing that could trigger or open up some things that we're not comfortable with. How do you navigate that space? Especially like you mentioned with the yoga, and just for full clarity on what you were saying, essentially there's certain yoga poses, certain yoga flows that can bring trauma to the person because they're putting themselves in a position that could feel discomfort, feel or trigger a memory or anything like that. So you try to be very intentional and aware of that in that modality, because it's simple to say downward dog in our minds, but that could be a very traumatic experience for someone if you're not being very intentional and aware of that. So in tying that piece in and trying to awaken the child, there are some childhood traumas that we have experienced. There are childhood issues that we have that is part of this living in the mind that we're talking about. Is part of a I don't want to say trauma response because I don't want to use these words loosely, but it is a protection, so to speak, for us to live in the mind, as we mentioned about the body, you know. So there are, us as women, we have made barriers and boundaries to help protect our bodies, help protect our hearts. And with that being said, so much of it is living up here because we feel safer with it being up here. How do you navigate the space of people's traumas being a part of the work that you're doing to help them kind of go back and release that child and live in the heart the way you described it?
Well, one of the things is, I think a big part of all of it is blame. Blame is kind of like shame, and blame is like the foundation of a lot of it, because it's this thing. If I wasn't, if I didn't do this, or if I didn't do that, or if I wasn't born to these parents, or if I wasn't, the blame could look like a lot of different things. No one is ever to be blamed for something that happened to them. But the other thing too is my practice is increasing my life force energy. So this is a overall assistance to a lot of things seen and unseen. So it's another tool. So you could do it with me.
Okay, hold on. Now my demons is not gonna fall out on this table now, is it? Because I try to live in my heart too, but they're gonna jump off my chest and start scurrying across the table. All right, come on, let's do it.
I probably should be clapping in this microphone, but I can't help it. You're funny. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So there is, this our heart center, right? Okay. This is the energy of our life force. This is source. Our life force is here. So if you take each hand and you just kind of put it next to the center, you can kind of feel like a ball of energy. You feel that? Yeah. So if you say, I now increase my life force energy.
I now increase my life force energy.
And then you take it out, you can feel that it got bigger. I now increase my life force energy.
I now increase my life force energy.
You take it a little further out, you can feel that it got bigger. I now increase my life force energy.
I now increase my life force energy.
And then you can kind of feel the energy ball got bigger. So you continue to do that until it gets larger and larger.
All right, we're going to come back because I need to keep increasing my I want to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, you do.
Did y'all do that with us? It was amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So try that. And then what you are doing is just that. And who did it?
Well, I think I did it.
You
right.
did, exactly. Yeah. On what? Your command, right?
Yeah.
I now increase my life force. So it goes back. Everything goes back. No matter what happened to you in life, it still all goes back to you. So since it all goes back to you, then how do we rectify it?
Right.
Increase your life force. Mind the heart drive.
I don't know if I could finish this interview because my life force energy is taking up all the space in the room.
And that's what you want.
That is what I want, but I'm going to keep going.
That's what you want.
So let me ask you this, because this is important. I think that people who are spiritual, and you mentioned this just a moment ago about your energies, how do you protect your energy? How do you protect your, and not necessarily protect, because I think in the work that you do, you want to give, right? And even in increasing the life force energy, there is still a level of balance to essentially almost creating a fortress around you that keeps your energy within, or only gives out but so much energy, because we are not, our energy, while abundant, it's not in infinity, right? So life practitioners really struggle with the balance of doing the work that they're teaching or guiding other people to do. How do you find ways to help protect your energies, your spirituality, and understand your own limitations of my life force energy is here. I just gave a bunch of it to you and you and you, and now I leave this space. How do I increase it again? And obviously this exercise helps, but there's still levels to what we give and what people pull from us, because some people do siphon your energy in ways. Absolutely. And you can feel it happening sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So you say, you're draining me. No, you're really draining me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so the life force is infinite. Is the infinite measure of life force. So the life force is the, like Star Wars, the force is with you. They're talking about the life force. So your life force is expansive and it goes far more. But your energy, how can I put it? Your energy centers or your energetic layers that surround you. So you want, your life force is pushing out, so it can push out to infinity. But your mental layer, emotional layer, all of your energy layers that are surrounding you, you can shrink wrap that to your skin, and that's what I do. Gotcha. So I shrink wrap my energy field to my skin, and I close my crown. So the crown, meaning you just close the crown, because your crown is open, whether you think it is or not. But you know how the babies have the soft spots or whatever. There's a opening here. So that's what I do. I shrink wrap my field and I close my crown.
Okay, so I went on a spiritual retreat. We're here with Leah Merriweather from Vibrate Higher, and I was called to go on a spiritual retreat. I was really in this very weird space. I consider myself to be fairly spiritual, but I needed more.
Okay.
Right? So I went on this spiritual retreat. Shout out to my buddy, who I still owe you a review, girl. You were the bomb. Her name is Kisa, and she was great. And she hosted me in a way that, so I believe she calls it the Goddess Retreat, but most of what she is focus on women, and centering you and centering your needs and your wants, and writing down the things that you want to release or shed, writing down the things that you want to come to you and draw to you. But in addition to her, I went and got a chakra realignment. And it was a very, very interesting and unique experience. I would definitely do it again. But in doing so, what you're talking about this shrink wrap into your skin, your crown being open, I definitely know that in our day-to-day experiences in living, we are not thinking about what's happening, the root center, the chakra center, the heart center, this piece, that piece, and we're, again, living in the mind. Can you explain a little bit more about the idea of the energies and your energetic field and what that looks like from, again, in a layman's way? Because again, I know sometimes we're losing folks when it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right. I put on my Lubriderm or my shea butter every day. Right. That's that on the skin. Okay.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we all can agree that there is a seen and there is an unseen. The unseen is when you walk into a room and you see all these people, but you feel something. And it could be your hair standing up on the back of your neck. It could be some tingling in your gut. It could be, anything that you feel. Well, you don't see that. Where did it come from? It didn't happen until you walked into the room. So I think if we're more aware and we walk around with intention. Intention to do what? Intention to be in the now. Intention to live from the heart space. You're going to notice things, and you're going to notice when you're not. It is when we are not aware and when we're operating off of programs that this kind of stuff seems so out there, but we're experiencing it every day. We just don't realize what it is that we're experiencing. And it's like if someone, like say you put a laughing baby in a room full of 100 people, everybody is probably going to laugh. If you don't laugh, you're probably a clone.
You are extremely operating in your mental space because like, this is supposed to be a conference. Whose baby is that?
Right. There you go. So it's you just pick it up because energetically. So why did you start laughing?
Right.
You start laughing because you picked up the energy of laughter. Right. So if you look at even now, let's match that
like
to someone.
yawns.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Let's match that to someone angry.
Yeah.
You're going to feel it. You're not necessarily going to get angry, but what it could do is trigger a feeling or emotion that you remember when your father used to get angry, or you remember. So again, those are things unseen. Right. So if we really, how can we deny it? If you're denying it, you're just choosing not to believe it.
Right. I think most times people do choose, quote unquote, not to believe things because even when we talk about, well, you have people who don't believe in God, people who don't believe in astrological signs, don't believe in numerology, they don't believe, quote unquote. That does not mean, if you don't believe, does not mean that it still doesn't exist.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you don't believe,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Now, what are some tools or ways for people who don't normally believe in these out there thoughts to just kind of open up a little bit? Not necessarily because again we don't expect them to go full-fledged, because usually some event precipitates when people make this shift. But if they were just open to the idea, what's one of the ways that you would say you don't have to fully believe everything that I'm saying to you, you don't have to fully convert to any of these energy mindsets, but just consider this when you enter the world tomorrow, later on today, what would that be? Well,
consider, be intentional and to become aware of your thoughts and ask yourself if they're yours. You ever had a thought that just came out of left field and then you're like, where did that come from? Right. It wasn't yours, is where it came from. Go into Walmart or Target and then pay attention to your thoughts. Or a crowded place. Just stand there and just be aware, you know, and be aware, just look around, be aware if you have any judgments. Look at people. Go to a mall, just watch people. See if you have any judgments or whatever. Where is all of this stuff coming from? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, again, it goes back to the things that we're experiencing every day, but we're like this. You know, we have our head in the sand, and we're sticking to what we've been told instead of exploring ourselves. Like,
so I think that is a really good point, one, because I don't think we intentionally think about the thoughts that fill our brains during the day, right? So you, like you said, you're in certain spaces or you think certain things, and some of it are your own thoughts, but some of them are intrusive thoughts.
Yes,
and not even necessarily negative intrusive thoughts, just intrusive thoughts in and of themselves. Yeah. So one thing we did talk about that day, going back to the whole relationship piece, and I do think that that balance between two people in a relationship, that this person's energy is impacting your energy and that your energy is impacting theirs. Obviously, joyful energy, you will hope that has an impact. But however, I find that a lot of times negative or kind of this anger or this elevated energy winds up impacting you in your relationship in ways that you don't necessarily know how to navigate at times. So I think the person who's angriest usually winds up winning, right? Or the person who's silent winds up kind of, you know. So what are some tools. One, because obviously the angry person is going to have their pressure up, and you should probably not be doing that. But the silent person, they are having thoughts, and not only are their thoughts kind of intruding on their heart, because you get a little scared, you get anxious, you get flustered. To your point, you are kind of retreating into a space of something that is usually related to your childhood or some type of other experiences that you've had. But in the space of relationships, people are operating in these head spaces. How can you do better? How can we do better about both parties trying to find a middle ground of, I don't want to be silent and allow you to be crazy, brooding, angry, or whatever these energies that's impacting a relationship. And then in a lot of ways, not to get off topic here in one respect, but the silent person is also impacting the relationship in a way that they don't really realize that their silence is
abuse
in so many different ways, right? So I'm not going to yell at you, but I'm not talking to you no more. I'm not talking to you for the rest of the day, tomorrow, and maybe the day after that. So there are two different types of energies that are not working well for the relationship. And the head anger space is one piece, but obviously there's a heart here.
Yeah.
How can two people, because it's one thing if it's you trying to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to expand my energy, I'm going to do these things, but now we need the two people to...
Well, there has to be alignment.
Okay.
The person, the other party must be in agreement. If there isn't an agreement, there is no alignment. There will not be no peace. And I mean, in the couple relationship, you can have peace within yourself. But what I'm saying is, if the two aren't in agreement for this to be basically kind of like their contract in the to work together on it, then you got one man out. So really it really goes again back to you. It always goes back to you. So it's beautiful if you have a partner and you guys come together and you're like, that is absolutely wonderful. But if that isn't the case,
it's usually not the case, right? They usually opposites attract. So if you can get two heart feeling, being, thinking, intentional, aware, blah blah blah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be amazing.
It hardly ever happens like that, right?
Hardly ever. But it's like mentioning a silent treatment. When I mentioned earlier about when it comes from the heart, is received from the heart. So there's a difference between silent treatment being a reaction and silence and peace. There's a huge difference. So when you within your own being practice peace, and the only way you're going to have that is when you're in your heart. Peace don't exist in the mind. And it doesn't, it's nothing external. It's only something you can work on. So the more you work on your own inner peace, the more you stay in neutrality, the less things around you are going to bother you. And then they're just going to seemingly go away,
Interesting. So I want to definitely speak a little bit more about the silence versus silent treatment. Because I do think many times, I'm guilty of this, but many times too, so I laugh about this because my zodiac is an Aries. And I laugh because yesterday, I just posted this yesterday. Right, but that's what people say, right? So I am always thrown by how many people believe that Aries or Aries women specifically we're talking about are like, but I also put into the context of I was a middle child. And it feels as though that has overtaken this fire that everybody's just like, yeah, Aries are off the hook and whatever, right? So I am slow to anger, and I think that I'm always trying to harness this fire that everybody knows is there. I know it's there too. Lord help you if I get angry, right? So I am so intentional of trying not to say things that I either don't mean or I didn't fully think about, right? But in that same vein, I am not at peace. I am just choosing not to say anything, to exacerbate the situation.
Right.
And I know that if I allow myself to get angry, it can get really bad. Because if you're angry and now I don't harness my anger, this could be a bad situation. So with that being said, I truly understand the silent treatment piece, because again, I am not at peace when I'm silent. I am trying not to blow a gasket. But at the same time, I'm not sure that I want to be silent. I'm just trying to figure out how and what to say.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to weaponize silence, because that's not really where it's coming from. It's more me trying to be intentional about not saying some crazy ish.
Okay, could it be, because I'm asking you, could it be that you're just waiting for the right time within your being to speak?
Most times, but it's not necessarily the right time. It's more about the right words, because if I'm extremely angry and I allow you to keep talking to me and I keep talking to you, all bets are off. So most of the time I just walk away. It's like, you know what? I'm gonna stop talking to you right now.
Right. So in that case, I will practice the mind to heart drop.
Okay.
I will practice that because especially if you're still festering over it, if the event already happened and you're still festering over it, you're in your mind because only the past exists in the mind. It doesn't exist in your heart. The heart is the now. The heart is when your real time happens in the heart. Anytime we're still contemplating or thinking about the argument or this and that, we're in my energy. And so what I practice, and look, when I say I practice, trust me, it's a practice, okay? Because it don't always work, okay?
So let's just be clear that the teacher and the guider is still working.
Let's just be clear.
You say God's still working on me.
Still, it's just, this is a journey, you know?
It is.
But it gets easier. And then you find you're at so much more peace. And then there are things that you can't even imagine yourself getting yourself into, you know, at this particular stage and within your being.
Yeah. And I am, as I said to you, I still am on a spiritual journey of my saying yes, but also saying no.
Yes.
And finding my voice kind of in the moment or trying to find ways to release it.
Yeah.
And, all that you spoke about from the child, the inner child, and operating from the heart is all a part of that. And I thank you for being here.
No, thank you. Thank you.
This is Leah Merriweather from Vibrate Higher. And can you believe that was almost an hour?
It was.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a great conversation.
Thank you. And there was so much more that we could have talked about, but we're going to let Leah go today. We thank you very much for watching Slay Your Day podcast with April Rogerson and our special guest, Leah Merriweather from Vibrate Higher. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, you can get, okay, I'm going to be real old school. Because I really kind of removed everything for a while, and I do that sometimes. So you can contact me via email. So I'm going to be all old school. And it's Leah, Leah, at vibratehigherllc.com. And that's how I can get it.
And the name of the retreat again is?
Sapria.
Okay. And it's free. It's in
the
North Georgia Mountains.
North Georgia Mountains. Go to their website and sign up. There is a waiting list. And you will get contacted when, you know, your name comes up on the list.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Leah. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye.